Hello and welcome to Silver Strike Tech. Today we'll be talking about the age-old classic, the Game Boy Advance. And I'll be breaking down to you why this console still holds up and why this console is probably the best retro gaming console to have. And in my opinion, the best gaming console, but that's with bias. Without it, it can still hold up as the best retro console. Taking a little look at the console here, you'll have multiple versions of the Game Boy Advance. The original version didn't have a backlit screen, used AA's, and so it just doesn't hold up anymore. Then they made the GBA SP, which is what this thing is. There's actually two different versions, but nevertheless, the SP is just a foldable Game Boy with a different sort of format. You can see it's got shoulder buttons. That was the addition after the Game Boy button-wise. It's got a volume control and a on and off switch. That's nice. Then there's a charging cable and a link port, which we won't use. Nobody's used that. Nobody uses that. The buttons feel nice, as you'd expect. So about the two different versions, there's one version, the AGS 001, and the AGS 101 is the other version. The first version has a front light, which lights up the screen well. You can play at night, and it's nice. The second version has a backlight, which makes it even brighter, and it's just better. That one's the one you want to get. However, the other one's good enough that because of the extra price, you won't go wrong with the 001. This version is actually the 001, although it says 101 on the back. It's a reshell with a pearl blue case, and the pearl blue case is exclusive to 101. So that's what the difference is, but don't be fooled. Now let's talk library. Here I have three kind of obscure games. You probably haven't heard of any of them unless you're super into this stuff. Super Monkey Ball Jr., Dark Arena, Sword of Mana. These are also a great way to show off the system's strengths and its weaknesses. We'll start with Sword of Mana. Playing games on the system? Simple. You put the game in, turn the console on, it's a wrap. Sword of Mana here is a very old style RPG. It's actually made by Square Enix, if you couldn't tell. Really, the only difference that sets it apart from the most general of JRPGs is that it has real-time combat. Other than that, it's extremely generic for an RPG, the story-wise. The story has some interesting beats now that I've played later on that are played off well, but it's very much like this is an RPG and that's its identity. To kind of encapsulate how generic the story is, at the very beginning you have this prince named Prince Shroud, I believe. He changes his name to Dark Lord. He changes his name to Dark Lord, and of course he's the villain. What do you know? But see, you have real-time combat here like Zelda, but the dungeons and worlds, they play out like any old RPG. It's a good time, nothing special. And if you're into this era of RPGs, this would be a good one to go with. Next, let's take a look at Dark Arena. So Dark Arena was an old Doom clone, and when I say Doom clone, that's not an exaggeration. I'm not just using the terms loosely to give you an idea of how much of a clone of Doom it is. The developers picked the level designers out of the Doom modding community. That is what the level designers came from. You can see here, it's actually fully 3D as far as FPS games go. Level design is so-so. There's some good moments, some bad ones. Nothing impressive or special. Gameplay is what sets this apart from other shooters on the GBA because of the simplicity of it. It's a very simple shooter. That actually helps it a lot from being like, it would have serious flaws, but the flaws it does have aren't serious because of the simplicity of it. The most interesting thing I can say is I kind of like the weapon choices you have. There's some really nice ones, especially later on. You can have like a guided missile that you basically can control yourself. And there's lots of fun weapons. Most of them are copies of things from Doom, but the game for the most part runs well except in certain rooms or in the higher difficulties when there's lots of enemies. So overall, it's just solid. And last but not least, we'll be looking at one of my favorite games for the GBA, even though it's obscure. You have lots of great games on the GBA, lots of them that are some of the best games ever made. You have Castlevania, Area of Sorrow, you have Pokemon Emerald, Wario Land 4, Advance Wars, Minish Cap. There's really a lot of different good games. But here, we have a game called Super Monkey Ball Jr. Back after the Dreamcast died a fiery death, Sega went running to Nintendo, and the first game they made was a port of an arcade classic called Super Monkey Ball. And they ported that onto the GameCube, but they also made a Game Boy Advance version, which they outsourced to Realism, and they did a really good job, because this isn't some cropped down port. You have a lot of bad ports of games, licensed games on the GBA. This is not one of those. This is about as faithful as they could make it. You see here this full polygonal textured 3D. It runs, the frame rate is like pretty great and not much to complain about. You can actually increase the frame rate by lowering the resolution with a cheat code on the menu, but I prefer it this way because the frame rate's good enough as it is. It runs super well. The levels are downsized, it has less levels, and there's a few original ones due to them not wanting to port the master mode, so they made its own master mode, which has its own world. It's just solid overall. Monkey Ball is a game that requires precision, and normally on the GameCube, since you have a joystick, that's okay. But on the GBA, there's only a D-pad. So the solution they use to fix this problem is that you can go faster when tilting the stage if you press A, and slower if you press B than the regular speed. And this was really an ingenious solution. It really was. The only problem was the game doesn't tell you that, so you have to figure it out by pressing the buttons yourselves. And similar problems can be found throughout. Because of the precision required, it's annoying that you can't turn the camera. I wish they had mapped that to the shoulder buttons. Then again, that is not an option in the main game as well, so it's not really to the fault of them, but they should have done it. VD Dev did that with Asterix and Obelix XXL, and that worked pretty well. Wish they had done that here, but really solid game. Now, another notable thing is the mini-games. There's 3 games: Monkey Fight, Monkey Bowling, and Monkey Golf. Monkey Fight's a good game, but after you've played it like 5 times, you kind of know everything there is to know, and so there's nothing left worth talking about. Monkey Bowling, I was really annoyed at. I couldn't do it for the life of me. I couldn't hit anything, but once I figured out you can use the shoulder buttons to put a spin on the ball, it got a lot funner. You just have to practice it to get good, and the same thing with golf. Golf is pretty deep, and you can like play it for a long while without it getting old. And so the mini-games are pretty great. Now let's talk library. Why is the GBA the best console there is for retro gaming? I've talked about the really good games there are, and there's a lot more that I couldn't think to mention. A lot of the complaints people have with the GBA's library is that it has so many ports. It literally has a series of NES ports just ported onto it. People think of it as a portable SNES because there's so many SNES ports as well. But that is to the strength of it nowadays, because you can think of so many popular games that are retro, and like half of all retro games made, mostly 2D ones made before the GBA, were ported onto it. So the library just encapsulates all of gaming history, really. And of course I can play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games as well. The micro version can't. There's actually a 3rd version of the GBA, which they removed backwards compatibility, but we won't be talking about that much today. You can do this with modern gaming too, but you end up oversaturated with games and stuff. And with cartridges, it's much easier to focus on like 3 games and not be playing too much at once. It's easier to do that. The limitations are really what make it charming, because there's games that are just as good, if not better, than the ones they have nowadays, but with the simplicity of it, it's a nice refreshing change, and most of them are done portably well. This game is great for carrying around with you. Also notably, the GBA has so many tactical RPGs, all of which are very good. This game console is very good for portable playing. It's bite-sized everything. This is a game console that everyone should get if they like retro gaming, and I would definitely recommend it. If you like this video, consider giving us a like and subscribe, of course. Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/shelfstrike. Help the channel out. Share this with your friends. Go have a wonderful day, eat a calzone, something. Yum. Buffalo calzones are good.